Combat sports is only as good as its champions. With UFC belts changing hands regularly through the course of a year, holding down a division is no easy task. With its current set of 12 champions, the UFC has a mix of new champions, dominant reigns, and fighters surrounded by sharks waiting for their shot at the gold. These are the current UFC champions ranked in order from worst to best. Aljamain Sterling, Bantamweight. In the eyes of most fans, Aljamain Sterling is not the UFC Bantamweight champion despite holding that place. After winning a world title via a disqualification when Petr Yan hit Sterling with an illegal knee at UFC 259, his reign was always going to be controversial. While Sterling recovered from injuries, Yan returned to the octagon with a win over Corey Sandhagen at UFC 267 to become the interim champion and solidify the unification fight for UFC 273 in April. After the way the first fight went, it would be hard to make an argument for Sterling beating Yan once he meets him again, and this throws his place as a legitimate UFC champion into one of a temporary placeholder. Julianna Pena, Women's Bantamweight. After going 2-2 in her recent fights, Julianna Pena pulled off one of the biggest upsets in UFC history by defeating Amanda Nunes at UFC 269 and submitting her in the second round. Despite Pena's incredible performance against Nunes, she will go into their rematch as a heavy underdog once again, which is somewhat unsurprising given that Nunes has long been considered the greatest female fighter in the UFC. With the two set to coach the next season of The Ultimate Fighter, Nunes' journey to claim back her title looms large over Pena's reign as world champion. Deiveson Figueiredo, Flyweight. When Deiveson Figueiredo became the flyweight champion by submitting Joseph Benavidez in the first round, it appeared that he would dominate the division for quite some time. However, at UFC 256, Brandon Moreno stepped up like many couldn't have expected, taking the champion to a draw and beating him in their rematch via submission. Despite Figueiredo winning his title back from Moreno at UFC 270, their fourth fight looms large after their 1-1-1 record against each other. Not to mention, with other contenders like Askar Askarov, Figueiredo's control of the division isn't as solidified as it once seemed when he first won the world title back in 2020. Glover Teixeira, Light Heavyweight. With one of the biggest feel-good moments of last year, Glover Teixeira finally realized his dream of becoming a UFC champion at 42 years old. Becoming the oldest first-time UFC champ, Teixeira defeated Jan Blachowicz at UFC 267. Despite his experience and pedigree in the sport, Teixeira putting his win streak together that would lead him to become a world champion was unexpected. With Yuri Prohaska next in line, Alexander Rakic, Magomed Ankalaev, and the former champion Jan Blachowicz all right behind the champion in the rankings, it will be a big test to see how long Teixeira's title reign can continue. Rose Namajunas, Strawweight. Another champion who is an incredible fighter but faces a significant threat from her contenders is Rose Namajunas. Similar to Figueiredo, Namajunas' current reign as champion is heavily affected by her previous reign, where it was assumed she would dominate the division for years to come, but was defeated in her second title defense. After defeating Weili Zhang in consecutive fights, Namajunas once again showed her class, and she's in a much stronger position than the fighters below her on the list because of this. Namajunas could fulfill that promise of dominating the division, but her next title defense will be a big hurdle for her to climb. Charles Oliveira, Lightweight. Charles do Bronx Oliveira's lightweight run will go down in UFC history as one of the great career turnarounds in the sport. Despite his incredible form in recent years, Oliveira has gone into his last two fights with Chandler and Poirier as an underdog. Being in arguably the most stacked division in the UFC is a big threat to him, despite his phenomenal performances in his recent bouts. With a fight against Justin Gaethje up next, and Islam Makhachev seemingly next in line after that, Oliveira may go into his next two fights as the underdog once again. He has proven a lot so far, but the lightweight division is never short of new challenges. Francis Ngannou, Heavyweight. Francis Ngannou is in a great place right now in his division after winning the title from Stipe Miocic and beating his biggest threat, Ciryl Gane, earlier this year. The biggest threats to Ngannou are the elements we don't know about just yet, like how his dispute with the UFC will play out, and Jon Jones's looming presence. On his way to the rematch with Miocic, Francis made light work of every contender that stood in his way, and this solidified his place as champion. With no immediately threatening contenders after Ngannou demolished the majority of the heavyweight division's top fighters, he would go into any title defense as a heavy favorite, unless Jones finally returns. Amanda Nunes, Women's Featherweight. The UFC Women's Featherweight division has been the least active weight class in the promotion. After the division was put together for the arrival of Chris Cyborg, its lack of contenders has stopped it from flourishing. When Nunes became a double champion at UFC 232, she was able to defend both titles because of how few fighters there were to challenge her at featherweight. The only remaining challenge of any notice to Nunes at featherweight is Kayla Harrison, who isn't even in the UFC right now, so her status as champion has almost no threat whatsoever. The lack of competition in the division has somewhat damaged its credibility, but Nunes is without a doubt a dominant champion. Alexander Volkanovski, Featherweight. Unbeaten since his first loss in 2013, Alexander Volkanovski has ascended up the pound-for-pound rankings as his incredible UFC run continues to grow. If you take one man out of the division, there's even an argument for Volkanovski being the top champion on the list, given how impressive he has been against the other contenders. When you put Max Holloway back into the mix, who in many people's eyes won the second fight with Volkanovski, their third fight has to happen, despite the champion winning the first two fights. With Holloway and Volkanovski being the clear two best featherweights in the division, the third fight with Max will solidify Volkanovski's place as a dominant champion. Israel Adesanya, middleweight. Undefeated when fighting at middleweight, Israel Adesanya has been one of the best examples of delivering on the hype. Just 4 years after arriving in the UFC, Adesanya has already started to lap the division, rematching opponents that he has already beaten. By defeating the consensus second-best middleweight on the planet for a second time when he won a unanimous decision over Robert Whittaker at UFC 271, Adesanya's place as the king of the middleweights is set in stone. Though he may choose to stick around to fight the likes of Jared Cannonier or Sean Strickland, his future probably lies at light heavyweight after he has cleaned out the division. Making a convincing argument for Adesanya losing his title at this point is a tough sell. Valentina Shevchenko, women's flyweight. Once the flyweight division opened up to Valentina Shevchenko, she gained an iron grip over it. After winning the vacant title in a fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk at UFC 231, she has defended the title 6 times since December of 2018, defeating all of the top contenders the division has to offer. Already beating the other women who make up the division's top 5, Valentina Shevchenko has proved that she is levels above the rest of the competition. Despite this, she is always willing to prove it again and again and face top contenders. But for many fans, the real interest is in Shevchenko moving up a weight division once again. The champion losing her title would be another huge upset, possibly even more so than Nunes versus Pena. Her status in the sport is only continuing to grow as she deals with contender after contender in dominant fashion each and every time. Kamaru Usman, welterweight. The current pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the UFC, Kamaru Usman, is undefeated since his second-ever pro fight. With a streak of 19 wins, 15 of them in the UFC, he has beaten a who's who of top prospects in a talent-stacked weight class. Building on his wrestling dominance with his improved striking at the hands of Trevor Whitman, Usman has started adding finishes to his resume. With his 2 great fights with Colby Covington and finishes over Gilbert Burns and Jorge Masvidal, Usman is getting better in every fight. With the title defense lined up against Leon Edwards, a man he already beat in 2015, rematches or the uncertainty of Khamzat Chimaev are the only exciting options left for Usman at welterweight. He's already dealt with some of the top fighters in the sport, and so far, he has won every rematch in impressive fashion. The Nigerian Nightmare is the best fighter in the UFC right now, and it's hard to imagine anyone touching that belt anytime soon. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.